She was just a dying Comanche girl in a widower's barn, but the whole town hunted her on the orders of a sheriff hiding his bloody truth. Sheriff Roy Butler, a hero in uniform, turned out to be an executioner, ready to burn any evidence of his crimes, even if it was a child. But Caleb, a silent farmer with a broken heart, chose not fear, but truth, and paid for it with everything but honor. And now listen, how one act of kindness stirred up a nest of lies and why justice, in the end, prevailed. That evening, the sun set quickly, as if someone had chased it from the sky. A heaviness hung over the canyons of West Texas as before a storm, but the storm had already passed. Its name was war, and Caleb McKenna remained its sediment. He lived alone. His ranch, surrounded by a wooden fence, stood far from human bustle. Once, voices echoed here of a wife, children, friends, now only the sound of his boots and the creak of an old gate. War had taken everyone from him, and he was left only with the land and a cruel stubbornness not to leave, not to surrender, not to speak. That night, he heard a rustle in the barn. At first, he thought a coyote, then a thief. He took his rifle, but beyond the piles of corn, he saw no enemy. Damn, Caleb exhaled and lowered the barrel. A girl lay on the floor, young, emaciated, skin like dust, hair tangled, face covered in scratches and bruises. She wore an old Comanche shawl, on her hip a wound, as if from a bullet. She tried to move and moaned. Caleb slowly knelt beside her. She had dark, slanted eyes. She looked directly at him, not with pleading, not with fear, but with the weariness of an animal long hunted. He didn't know why, but he picked her up, carried her into the house, bandaged the wound, gave her water, the next day a spoonful of soup, and then more. She didn't speak, only watched. 3 days passed before she said, "Saya." That was her name. The neighbors didn't know, thank God. In the county, she wouldn't have been spared. The Comanche had recently slaughtered an entire settlement by the river. Caleb didn't know where she was from, whom she had lost, or why she was alone. But every evening, when he lit the lamp, she was already sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flame as if searching for a way back in it. One night, he woke to a scream. Saya was racked with fever. Caleb held her until she quieted. In the morning, she said through tears, "I didn't shoot, it wasn't me." He didn't ask anything, just handed her a mug of broth. 2 weeks later, she could walk. She started helping in the kitchen, washing bandages, cleaning the stable. Her hands were nimble, her movements careful. Sometimes Caleb caught himself waiting for her gaze, and sometimes she looked first. And suddenly, a knock at the door. Outside stood a man in military uniform, Preston County Sheriff Malone, with 2 riders. They came with news. "I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel, so you will help me in motivation to make such great stories for you, and I will see that you like them. Enjoy watching, everyone." "You're harboring a Comanche girl. We saw tracks, and a boy from Jefferson's farm said he saw a silhouette in your barn." The sheriff's voice was dry, like August grass. "If we find her, you know what will happen." Caleb clenched his fists. "I have no one here, I live alone, you know that." Malone narrowed his eyes. "If you're lying, you're harboring her. That's betrayal." "Caleb, don't forget who didn't burn your house." They left, but that night, Saya sat on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, sleepless. Caleb poured her coffee and sat beside her. "Did you run away?" he asked. She nodded, then, after a long pause, said, "I was sold to the fort. They said it was for peace, but the men there." She fell silent, clenching the mug with both hands. "I ran away. One of them shot me." He didn't reply, but something inside him broke loose, because he knew that fort, and he knew those who negotiated peace there. And the next day, a cross, carved on a board, appeared at his ranch gate, a sign, a warning. Someone already understood everything, and someone had begun the hunt. The cross by the gate was burned by someone in the morning. They just set it on fire and left, without a word or a trace. Caleb silently shoveled ash over it. He didn't ask Saya if she was afraid. She didn't ask why he was still keeping her there. The answer to both questions was yes. "Do you understand they're coming?" she asked in the evening, watching him sharpen his knife. "Let them come," he replied, and there was no bravado in his voice, only weariness and resolve. Saya wasn't a girl to be hidden under the floor. In her gaze was old pain and young steel. She didn't know how to cry, only how to hold her chin high. That evening, she asked, "Teach me to shoot." Caleb looked at her for a long time, then silently handed her a rifle. For 3 days, everything was quiet, but on the fourth, as always, just before dawn, riders appeared on the horizon. Sheriff Preston Malone, 5 men with him, 1 in a mask, and 1 with a rope on his saddle. "Caleb," Malone shouted from the fence, "this is the last time. Bring her out, or we'll burn your whole damn house down." Caleb came out alone. "I don't have a girl." "You're harboring her. We know. She's a murderer. 3 of our men are dead after the raid. She's one of them. Hand her over and we'll forget about you." "And have you forgotten I fought on your side, Sheriff?" "Exactly. That's why I'm giving you a chance." "Did you burn the village by the river, Preston? Did you give the order?" The sheriff paled. "What are you talking about? My wife had a cross on her neck. You took it. I found it on your dog." Caleb approached slowly, as if the wind stirred the dust. "Not his steps. You killed her. Not the Comanche. You." The riders' faces froze. "You don't know what you're talking about," one mumbled. "I do," Caleb replied. "Now leave, or you'll die here." He knew he had no chance in open combat, but Saya had set traps, as she was taught in her tribe. He himself had booby-trapped the stable, and when someone climbed over the back fence one night, the explosion rattled the entire valley. 1 man died on the spot, the others retreated. The sheriff's revenge was swift. He detained George Cassidy, Caleb's old neighbor, broke his fingers, and threw him onto the road. In the morning, Caleb found him with trembling lips and blood on his collar. "They said," the old man whispered, "you're with her, with the savage." Caleb only nodded. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them you wouldn't harm anyone, that if she's with you, it means you have something to live for." At night, Saya sat in the barn and drew with charcoal on the ground. Caleb once asked what it was. "My brother, he died before my eyes. I don't want to forget his face." He silently sat beside her. For the first time in many months, his voice broke. "I had a brother too. We were in the same regiment. He was taken off his horse near Green River. I stayed. He didn't." They sat in silence until dawn, and in that silence, something grew between them. Not love, not yet, but trust, like a crack in a stone into which water has seeped. And in town, a volunteer squad was already gathering officially to deal with the threat. Saya, not just a runaway girl, she a symbol, terror and shame for those who try to maintain order by force. The sheriff gathered men with rifles. Caleb knew 3 days left, no more. And then he made a decision that would change everything. He rode to the judge, an old, lonely man named Allison, who had kept the county records even before the war. He knew a lot, too much. "You want me to testify against the sheriff?" the judge asked. "I want you to save the girl." The judge looked at him for a long time. "Bring her, tomorrow, at dawn." But when Caleb returned, the house was empty. Saya was gone. Only her shawl lay on the bed, and 3 words, carved with a knife on the wooden window frame. "I go forward." Saya walked alone. On the dusty road, as hundreds of times before, only now there was no fear in her. There was blood on her soles, a map in her head, and names in her heart. She didn't want to be saved, she wanted to put an end to what began then, that night when the village was burned to the ground. She arrived in Willow Creek at dawn, the same town where her tribe once traded furs for tobacco. Now there were thorny glances, white signs with "No Indians," and faces turned away. She stood in the middle of the main street. "Sheriff Malone, come out." 30 seconds passed and the station doors opened. The sheriff came out slowly, with a smirk. Behind him, 2 deputies. "You came alone, without Caleb?" "I don't hide behind others." "Too bad. That would have been your first smart thought." "I want to know, who gave the order to slaughter the village near Gray Peak?" You and yours." "No, my people were sleeping that night, but you." "You were there. I saw. Your face, your clothes, your ring." "You have no proof. Girl, we have the dead. You'll stay here." She knew it was a trap, but she also had a move. From the balcony opposite, where the photographer Dan Beckett lived, there was a sharp click. He took a picture, Saya and the sheriff, his threatening posture, her direct gaze. "This will reach the newspapers," she said. "Not in this town, in another." You killed unarmed people, you burned the village to advance your land to the river, and I will prove it. He hit her, hard, so hard she fell in the dust. Kill her, he snarled at his deputies, but when they stepped forward a shot rang out. And another. And a third. From a hill on the outskirts, with a rifle in his hands, stood Caleb. Try it. Saya got to her feet, blood trickling from her lip. I didn't come for death, she said, but for truth, and I will get it. They escaped with Dan's help. He knew a secret passage behind the mill. They reached Caleb's house under the cover of night. The next morning, they were surrounded. Not 5, half the town, a civilian militia, armed and angry. Among them were the mayor, farmers, and even the blacksmith who once made a ring for Caleb's deceased wife. Everyone knew today would be the end, or the beginning. Caleb brought Saya forward. We are not your enemies, but if you choose the sheriff's side, you choose the side of a murderer. Lies, someone shouted. This Indian which killed John Betts and his son. They burned her village. I saw them among the bodies of women, children, Caleb said. I was there, afterward, and found my wife's locket in their hands. The crowd hesitated. And then Judge Allison stepped forward. I knew, and I was silent, but not anymore. 10 years ago, Malone bought land under false names. He burned Comanche settlements to take water sources. I saw the documents, and I signed them. Why are you saying this now? Someone asked. Because I am old, and they are young, and if we don't speak the truth now, tomorrow we will have neither honor nor memory. The sheriff, seeing he was losing control, pulled out his revolver, but he didn't fire. It was a woman from the crowd, a widow, whose husband didn't return after the raid. He left on Malone's order and didn't return. She put a bullet in the chest of the man who lied to her. The sheriff's body lay on the ground, empty, like his orders. No one celebrated. People dispersed slowly. Some cried, some were silent. Saya stood in the middle of the street, where for the first time in her life she wasn't being chased away. Are we alive? She asked Caleb. He nodded. For now, yes, but tomorrow we'll have to build. That night they didn't sleep. They just sat on the porch, looked at the stars that weren't visible before when everything was filled with fear and lies. And for the first time in a long time, Saya smiled. 2 months passed. The town of Willow Creek seemed to shed its skin. The burned lies of the sheriff left ashes, upon which sprouts began to grow, not of peace, no, but of honesty. People no longer shouted at Saya, no longer spat at her feet. Some even nodded. And old Emma, the same woman who once called her a savage, one day sent a package through Dan with a woolen blanket and a note. My daughter would have found it useful. You too. Saya lived on the ranch. Caleb was no longer just a silent widower who feared new attachment. He knew, everything that is destroyed can be rebuilt, if not by hands, then by heart. One day, Saya returned to the ashes of her village. She stood among the charred stones, where women once sang, children ran, and where her father wove dream catchers. She didn't cry, she whispered names, one by one, aloud. My mother, Isla, brother, Takoa, old Hoso, who sang in the evening, little girl Loma, who wove a doll. You are here, and I am too. She buried a small bag of earth from Caleb's ranch, and then she stuck a stick into the ground and hung her mother's necklace on it. Here will be memory, and a home, a new one. Meanwhile, a new sheriff was elected in town, Dan Beckett. He refused for a long time, but it was his photo that proved the guilt of the previous one. He gave his word. Now, in Willow Creek, there would be trials, not torches. Saya, at Judge Allison's suggestion, began teaching children, both Comanche and white, in a small school on the hill. She taught them not only letters, but also truth, about how easy it is to blindly believe the strong, and how important it is to listen to those who are silent. Caleb built a separate small house for her nearby, with a porch where in the mornings she drank coffee, wrapped in that same woolen blanket. Sometimes he sat beside her, sometimes he just watched from his porch, silent, but now his silence was no longer pain, it became an anchor. One evening, Saya went out into the field, where the grass swayed in the wind, like her sister's hair in childhood. The sky was a sunset, and the air smelled of smoke, but not the kind that brings death, but the kind that says, a hearth is burning here. Caleb walked up to her. Remember you said, You came not for death, but for truth? I remember. Did you find it? Saya was silent for a long time, then she shook her head. I found not truth, I found life, and that's enough. He nodded. They stood like that for a long time, until the last rays of the sun faded, until the past became just a shadow on the grass. And in the distance, where her tribe's camp once was, smoke columns rose again, but these were not fires. These were bonfires. People were returning. Saya smiled. Let it be as it should. Yes, Caleb said, only now we know how to keep it. Thus fear died, thus memory remained. Thus too one with a broken soul, the other with a burned past found in each other not salvation, but a future.